Treasurer, thank you for your time. These figures today are terrible, but they're roughly in line with expectations. Was there anything about today that has made you change your plans for the budget next month?
Well, these numbers are for the June quarter, April, May and June of this year, which saw hundreds of thousands of Australians lose their jobs or see their work hours reduced to zero. It was a very difficult time, and GDP has fallen by 7%, which is a record amount. But there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There is a road out. There is hope, Tracy, and that's what we're focused on, getting people back to work and getting through the COVID crisis, which has wreaked such havoc, not just in the Australian economy, but right around the world.
Should we be bracing for a horror budget?
Well, the budget is about helping Australians get back to work. So you're going to see a focus on skills. We've already announced funding for 340,000 new training places. You'll see a focus on infrastructure. We've brought forward $10 billion worth of infrastructure projects, shovel-ready projects, which can get people back to work and build a more productive nation. We passed legislation through the Parliament just yesterday, Tracy, which will see more flexibility in our industrial relations system, which will help businesses keep people employed through this very difficult crisis. We're cutting red tape because we want to make it easier for businesses to get on doing what they do best, namely hiring people, innovating and growing and doing business. So that's what we're focusing on: skills, infrastructure, industrial relations, cutting red tape and, of course, tax incentives to get more business investment.
You need to also get people spending again. They're hanging on to their money. How are you going to build confidence?
Well, one of the numbers that we saw in the National Accounts today was the savings ratio increased to 19.8%, nearly double what it was during the GFC and way higher than it normally is through the year. That just reflects the caution that people have right now, but also the fact that people have been at home and unable to spend money. So the best way we can get people to spend money is to open up the economy, to ease the restrictions, and once the health crisis is under control, people can get out and spend on entertainment, go to the local pub, buy gifts as they normally would, and go about their normal lives.
Treasurer, Australians are punch drunk, I think, on bad news. There's been plenty of it in the last few months. And JobKeeper and JobSeeker, you know, we were talking about falling off the edge of a cliff at the end of September. Now JobKeeper and JobSeeker have been extended to the end of March. Now we're looking at a cliff at the end of March. Are you absolutely hard and fast on the timing and the wind back of JobKeeper and JobSeeker, especially given the pain Victorians will be in?
Well, JobKeeper has actually been extended and expanded. It was only originally legislated for 6 months, and now, as you say, it will go out for another 6 months. So it's a full 12-month program, and at $101 billion, it's the single largest economic support package Australia has ever undertaken. And right across the country, Tracy, listen to your program tonight. Will be wonderful stories about JobKeeper and how it's kept people in a job, whether it's a local cafe, whether it's a local aviation company, whether it's an audio-visual company, whether it's a local zoo. It doesn't matter. People have been using JobKeeper to keep their staff in a job. So it's going to go out to March. We're seeing the economy open up. Outside of Victoria, restrictions are being eased and people are getting back to work. Victoria is a different situation altogether, but I'm hopeful that in the weeks and the months ahead that the restrictions will certainly be eased.
Let's talk about borders, because the other problem is that we normally spend billions of dollars on tourism and we haven't, and related hospitality and shopping. We haven't been able to do that lately because borders have been closed. Both international borders and state borders have been closed. How much of a hit is that having on the economy?
A significant hit, but not just on people's livelihoods, but on people's lives. I mean, how can it be okay, Tracy, that a young woman loses an unborn child because of confusion at our borders? How can it be okay that a 4-year-old boy getting treatment for his cancer is separated from his mother because of confusion at the borders? How can it be okay that a Victorian teacher 2 kilometres from the South Australian border is not deemed to be an essential worker, so can't go and teach her class? These are the cruel and confused implications from these strict border approaches. What we need is more compassion. What we need is more common sense. That will be good for our economy, but more importantly, good for our society.
So 400 AFL representatives just flew into Queensland today against those examples that you just quoted. Is it time for the Queensland border to open?
Well, I think the Queensland Premier's got some questions to answer there. How can it be okay for people to go up to prepare for the footy game and it's not okay to go to hospital for treatment? How does that work? Queensland hospitals are actually for Australians. New South Wales hospitals are for Australians. I was reading a speech, Tracy, that John Howard gave 15 years ago as Prime Minister, and he made it clear that he was first and last an Australian nationalist. He had little time for state parochialism. I think everyone needs to get a grip here and recognise that we're first and last Australians. And we've got to look after our fellow Australians. And we've got to implement policies that advance the interests of our fellow Australians. And nowhere is that more important than on our borders. And that's why Scott Morrison is so right to take to the National Cabinet this Friday a definition of what a hotspot is based on medical advice. Transparent, can lead to more targeted outcomes, clear metrics based on medical advice. This should be the way forward for all states, not just some states.
Can the economy start to work again while the state borders are closed, state and territory borders are closed?
Well, the economy is working again, Tracy. Of the 1.3 million Australians who lost their job or saw their hours reduced to zero at the start of the crisis, around 700,000 of those are now back in work. Victoria is a different situation because as a quarter of the national economy, it's in lockdown. People are subject to curfews. You can't move more than 5 kilometres from your home. Grandparents can't see grandchildren. Families can't go to work and kids can't go to school. That's a very unfortunate situation, and you've heard me speak publicly about the need for the Premier to provide a plan for the way out of that crisis in Victoria. But outside of Victoria, the jobs are coming back, the economy is working. It's not easy. There are tough days ahead. There are many people who are doing it tough right now, and our thoughts are with them, and we have the policies to support them.
Just finally, Tony Abbott says it's time to ease the lockdown and let Australians take personal responsibility for their risks with the virus. Is he right or completely deluded?
Well, obviously this is a health crisis, and only when we get the health crisis under control can we get better economic outcomes. So I'm in favour of following the medical advice. But you've also got to take into account the huge economic... We're going to take into account the huge economic impacts, Tracy. And that's why I've called for the Premier in Victoria to provide a roadmap out, because Victorians need hope. They need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what we are providing to all Australians with our policies.
OK, just finally for clarity though, you are completely rejecting Mr Abbott's argument.
Well, what I'm saying is we need to save every life possible. Every life is valuable, but we also need an economic pathway out, and we also need to take into account the huge economic cost that the coronavirus restrictions are having.
OK, all right. Thank you for your time.
Good to be with you, Tracy.